So anthropologists study culture, generally by doing field work. Let me move my picture here so you can see this wonderful picture of some of the young women that I met and did research among in Mumbai, India in 2013. So when I went to Mumbai, India to do my field work, I've done field work in a number of different places, but this was definitely one of my favorites. I went to learn about arranged marriage, and I went to talk to girls and young women. In India, if you're not married, you're called a girl, even if you're 40 years old, which says a lot about how they perceive singlehood and marriage. But I went to ask young women who who were educated and lived in the biggest city in India, the capital city, and who had, who were like middle class and above, what were their thoughts about arranged marriage? So I spent a lot of time with young women during the period that I was there, and asked them a number of questions about the differences between arranged marriages and love marriages, whether they would prefer one or the other, what their families would prefer. We'll talk more about this when we get to the marriage section of our course, but there's no substitute for being in the location where your study participants are. Being able to sit with them and talk with them multiple times, get to know them. In some cases, people, and in a lot of cases, actually, people will have extended stays for maybe a year in which they live and work with the people that they're studying so that they can develop real trust and rapport and, really come to know what people's lives are like. So we call this participant observation. And participant observation is sort of the method of fieldwork. It is participating with people's lives, but also maintaining some distance in terms of always observing what people are doing, maybe writing or recording field notes at the end of every day. And then, later on, trying to analyze what people have said to you. So anthropology is more than just a description of cultures. You're also thinking about why do people do the things that they do? How can I fit this into a larger understanding of, in the Indian case, for instance, media, marriage practices, modernity, etc. There's also this conflict between what we call ideal behavior and real behavior. So ideal behavior might be something that people write down on a survey, the way that they think they behave, right? That's why anthropologists tend not to use surveys too much. The real behavior is what eventually you might see by being in the field with them. So ideal behavior is interesting because people will tell you, these are my values, these are the standards, or these are the rules of society. But then their real behavior shows what kind of gap there is between those two things. And only by being there can you discover the real behavior. Then finally, you also, really want to think about your trusted associates in the area. Some people call them informants, some people call them study participants. There's a lot of terminology, but basically these are people that you trust, that trust you, that have some knowledge or skills that you're interested in learning about. You develop an equal and trusting relationship with them. And in return, they will sort of introduce you to others who can then also be study participants. It is very, very important to anthropologists to act in an ethical manner, to treat people with respect and dignity, and to be sure that our work isn't ever used against people. This is pretty controversial because it has been in the past in terms of studying people that a government, for instance, would like to subdue. So there's a lot of stories there, as you might imagine. But in general, we want to make sure that the dignity and the integrity of the people that we study is the most important thing.